Thank you so much for coming to today's 2:30 talk. I'm Olivia Bright. I'm Daata's Community Manager and Public Program Curator. And I'm thrilled, delighted, enchanted to introduce you all to this fabulous artist, Trulee Hall, who sat beside me. Lovely to be here with you.
Thank you. Oh, I don't know, is mine working?
Could we get a mic on Trulee?
Represent. Hello? Yeah? Okay. Thank you all for being here. I know there's so much going on, so thanks for your attention.
Yeah,
We'll try to make it fun for you.
we're going to make it really fun. So we're here to talk about Trulee's first ever NFT, which is also a gorgeous film that we commissioned back in 2020 called Two Heads, Two Ways. And we're going to start by getting to know Trulee a little bit and talking about her process and the practice, and then really dig into all of the juicy, sexy, ancient themes that are like flowing through this work. So let's start maybe.
Yeah. Get ready.
Woo. So Trulee Hall creates multimedia installations that propose an uncanny hyper-reality rife with tongue-in-cheek comedy, often flirting between funhouse and technicolor nightmares. She draws on a childhood immersed in the aesthetic and decorative formalities of the American Southern conservative society and religious culture, and contrasts these with familiar subcultures. Her practice spans video, sculpture, painting, audio composition, and choreographed dance. Hall integrates these into immersive installations whose vignettes offer multiple representations of a non-narrative visual subject, replayed through painting, sculpture, and video. That was Trulee Hall.
Sum me up quite nicely, thank you.
So to introduce the work a little bit more, we've actually got a nice trailer for you. So here we go. Bit of a teaser there for you. So Trulee, I'd like to start by talking about the story of the film's evolution. Actually, I'll just make sure we've got another slide. Hang on one second.
Oh, yeah. That's right. How did I come up with this in the beginning? Totally. So, I don't know if you caught that, but I'm a multimedia artist, and I do all kinds of work. Usually my ideas come from my paintings. So I start with like a drawing or a painting. I just get kind of crazy wild and have a blank canvas. Don't know what I'm doing. I just start with like a general vibe and end up making basically a painting, usually in a couple of hours. And initially I try to channel some sort of vibe, whatever it is I'm dealing with or whatever I'm feeling like the universe wants me to talk about. And so in this piece, I started, is it okay if I stand up? I like feel a little constrained here with this little chair. So initially I started like scrubbing the canvas with my hands to make these lines. So it was like kind of like finger painting. And then I went back in with these like kind of like abstract lines, and I was thinking about the female figure, but like in a way that's mythologically and crazy, like seeing the human figure from many different dimensions at once. So I wanted to see the front and I wanted to see the back at the same time. So it's like the same person, but then also not just from one perspective, but two. So I decided to make it like twins almost. So I always was thinking it like two heads, two ways, but like conjoined twins, or then somehow like two perspectives on the same human body and the two perspectives on the same life. Because I could say from my own life that I don't always see things in one way. I have almost like a dichotomy inside of me where I'm like a bad girl and I'm a good girl, and I want to do things that fall in line, but I also want to break the rules. So how do you express that in a work of art? So to me, it was like the two heads were the same body expressing an idea. And usually I start with a painting and then I decide, how am I going to make this into a video? So what I did was, okay, I need two actors, and I built like this like scaffolding so that they could lay horizontal beside each other. And then I made a giant body that was, maybe skip forward. You can kind of see a little bit more how it looks in this space. So this was originally an installation at the Zabaldovich collection in London in 2020. So this is part of the set. So I made these like two these bodies that were sculptures, and then it's kind of bright in here, but you can get the idea. That I had like two heads on each side. So the sets were really important to me, and then I was using these sex dolls as stand-ins for the actors, and I painted their faces to be like reflection of the actors. Because when you're thinking about like sexuality, it's oftentimes we objectify women. That's like sort of an obvious thing, but not something we talk about in the art world so much. So I wanted to make it like super literal. So as these sex dolls, these women became objects and more disembodied versions of themselves. So the two heads are kind of floating above with these like snakes coming out of their mouth, which will make sense more later. But I just wanted to give you an idea of how my work is usually shown, where there's like a video and a sculpture and then more of an installation. This is another kind of version of that sculpture. So this was the installation where I had like two ladies' heads poking out. When you think about like a circus thing where you like stick your head out and take a picture, that's kind of what I was going for that. Here's a like close-up on the sex dolls, which, they're super creepy. Don't get me wrong. That was like my intent. So hope you guys can handle it. Here's the painting right next to the video. So the video is like, again, like a storyboard, I guess. Like my original idea for the painting comes from like some internal channeling source, and then I try to make a video about it. Yes.
So interesting. It's great seeing this photo of it here in on show as well with the painting, because it's so, like the original painting was so luminous. It's amazing that it's actually just paint, really, because it has this luminosity of a film. It's interesting that even though it starts as a painting, in a way, it's always a film. It's always there in its character and its spirit. And that's what's so great about this also now being an NFT, because it's still the same work. It's two heads, it's two ways, but it's still that same like amazing piece of work. It's not sort of necessarily morphed and changed too much. Its character it's still present with it the whole way through its journey. I think that's really cool. And actually, as you said, everything's really quite dark. I've read that color is very important to you in your work, and this piece is basically just black. There's a lot of black, which is not normal across the board for a lot of your works. This is quite an unusual, unique piece in that way. I don't know, could you speak a bit more to that? I'm quite curious about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, it's very funny. This is like kind of my most goth work, I guess. But I do have like a goth side to me, like a kind of punk rock goth side to me from my high school years or whatever. But in general, I'm a very happy person, and I'm like, full of life and love. My last show is like green and blue and like flowers and stuff. So this is particularly like a kind of like intuitive, dark moment. Not dark in a like scary way to me, but dark in like a middle of the night, like you're meditating and you're half awake, half asleep. Like, how do you find yourself when it's just you and you're like in kind of an abstract space? That's to me, the nature of consciousness that's pretty cool to me. I'm a spiritual person, not necessarily a religious person, but I feel like as an artist, kind of your resource, like what you draw for from ideas, is like that kind of like deep space of like alone time. So that was the initial inspiration of like how we started this piece, was like, what do you do when you're alone in your thoughts? Like that kind of meditation vibe. Yeah, so I usually don't use all black, although I love black, don't get me wrong, but yeah, colors on my work are really important. Like gold has been a huge color in my work, which is like more of a shiny, like show-offy color. And this to me is more like your subconscious. This is more like the underbelly, like your dark side you don't like show everybody. It's not like your pretty side where you're showing off. Like it's like, you know, the stuff, the real stuff that you have when you're alone.
What you just said then was really interested me, particularly what you said about it being a meditation and that darkness of being, that feeling in the middle of the night, that sort of loneliness of just you and your fears or your thoughts or your impulses or desires. And I'm curious, you know, a lot of people, when they are overwhelmed by those feelings, they need an outlet. And for some people, it's art. And I wondered, does that relate in some way? Is that, to an extent, your relationship with art? Or do you think that actually it goes beyond that?
That's a great question. So every art and every artist like has its own philosophy. So I'm not going to speak for anyone but myself, but I try to be very brave in my work and speak from a place of authenticity and reveal things that are like kind of edgy. So there's a lot of taboos and that I'm addressing in this particular piece, and like issues that are maybe things that I had a hard time with when I was younger. So like, for instance, I'm from a very conservative family, very religious, Southern Baptist. I'm from Georgia. And like for me to be okay with myself being queer and being like a weirder, I was always a tomboy. So this is a very lesbian film, if you haven't picked that up already. But so it's like kind of me coming to grips with my own sexuality and the shame and sort of like weirdness that you inherit sometimes from a very Christian family. But it's also a celebration of just being alive and my version of the nature of consciousness.
That's amazing.
That's like a mouthful there.
It's wonderful. I think we should watch a bit more.
Okay.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. The
Yeah.
work is very intimate, and it was commissioned by Daata back in 2020 at the height of the pandemic, when the only way that we could enjoy or experience art was online by ourselves through a screen. And it's been such a pleasure to bring it to NADA, actually, and to see it in the flesh on a huge 65-inch television. It's suddenly in a very public setting. And also given the fact that it's been a couple of years since it's commissioned, what's it been like to see it here at the fair and to kind of re-engage with the work? Because it's, you know, you depart from it a bit after you've finished it and it's all done, and now you're seeing it again. Could you speak a bit more about that? How's it been like?
Sure. I think for everyone, time has been kind of warpy and weird the last couple years. But it seems like a million years ago that I made this. But it's funny because it actually does sort of speak to the time when we were all like isolated in our rooms during the lockdown. I think that the sort of vibe where you're like floating in black space and like, where am I? What is life? And you have to kind of revisit your whole like notions of reality or whatever. So it's funny that I did just before. I think I filmed it just before. Yeah, definitely. Because I had actors and everything. There was like no COVID before. I was like filming it and planning it. Anyway, so like my version of reality is now, I don't know, I think looking back on it through the COVID lens, sort of interesting to see. But at the time, I was just, I don't know if everyone relates to this, but I've had many relationships with my own reality where I've have out-of-body experiences, and I've also have trouble sleeping at night. So I really love that time in the middle of the night where you're like half asleep, half awake, and like channeling different energies. So to me, it's like kind of a positive vibe. It's not necessarily a negative space to be in. But yeah, I actually really love listening to my subconscious and like more of a Carl Jung sense, communicating with the collective unconscious and kind of connecting. It's like a loss of self in a way, and that like the ego-bound version of self. I think it's really cool to, when you kind of forget who you are, like me, I'm a girl, I'm like in Los Angeles, I have this much money, and connect to a larger universe. That to me is like a very special place, and it oftentimes happen when I'm in that meditative, like middle of the night kind of zone. So I think hopefully all of us during COVID at least got a little extra time for ourselves, so I'm hoping. But I
That's
made this
fascinating.
before COVID, so, but it's like kind of related to that.
It's fascinating, and it's great to hear you speak about it. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, interviewing you. It's wonderful. When you talk about that experience, you know, of making the work and it being very intuitive and quite spiritual, it's funny, isn't it? Because it's all you. It's all part of your experience. And yet, as you say, like, you don't star in this. It's actually not about you as the person. It's on a much sort of deeper, more cosmic level, which is so great because I think everybody, male or female, you can sort of experience this on quite a human level and still have an interesting reaction to it. I'm curious because when I first watched it, I thought, oh my gosh, it is quite explicit. I thought, suddenly I was like, whoa, that's really strong. And I think it's a real testament to the fact that it's still quite a taboo subject. You know, I don't see that many other works of female masturbation here at NADA.
Right.
And that's really powerful. I'm interested because obviously you're the director and you're directing people's gaze, and it does sort of make you as a viewer, you have to engage in a sort of more active style of viewing. You're not just like a passive voyeur in this piece. When you're making a work, do you ever have an audience's kind of reactions or like emotions in mind, or is it just pure expression?
Good question. So I went to some fancy art schools, which I've was very good for me. But so I've been under scrutiny many times, and I think it's really helpful to like try to anticipate viewers' reactions, but it's actually not the artist's job. I feel like my job is to be true to myself. If you like it, that's great. If you don't, that's also okay. It's fine. There's lots of other artists here, and not everybody's going to like everybody's work. But it's important for me to do something that I'm proud of as my human being, like when I die, I'm like, good job, me, you know? You did a great job being you. You know, that's like my,
Certainly did.
I don't know if that like sums it up. But
Definitely.
I also do think, I do a lot of studio visits and lectures in colleges. I've been invited to many colleges in Los Angeles and actually New York, all over, to do lectures. And I really try to help the students be more themselves, and give them like actual like real life examples of like how to be a better job of yourself. Like I don't want them to be more like me. I want them to be themselves. So that's not something that's normally taught in schools. But yeah, I feel like I'm doing a good job of being me. Like it or don't like it, that's okay.
Love it. Let's see
Does
a
that
bit more.
answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay,
Let's see a
cool.
bit more of that.
I also want to say, like, I never thought that I would be showing, like, or talking about masturbation in front of, like, a totally, like, group of people that I've never met before. So that's, like, a little bit weird for me. And I'm, like, a little, like, "Arr!" You know, I'm very outgoing in some ways, but also very shy. I think artists spend a lot of time by themselves. You know, I'm generally, like, by myself in the studio. So this is, like, a little bit, you know, putting myself out there to even talk about masturbation. I feel proud of myself, but also it's like, it's like, you know, it's not something people usually talk about, but I think everybody does it. So I'm acknowledging that that's a very taboo subject. And I think that's cool in art, to be a little, like, edgy, right? I mean, that, to me, that's, like, the point is, like, if it's boring and you've seen it a million times, blah, you know, like, I want to do something new and do something real and something authentic to me and that relates to people, like, in a real way. So
Totally. And it's refreshing as well.
thank you.
It is. Could we play this clip, please? Thank you. God, it's so beautiful seeing it on such a large screen as well. And the way that you know, rip and ride between all those different mediums is fascinating, and it always keeps it fresh. I'm interested, I know that you do often sort of jump in and out of different processes and mediums, and it's interesting because it reminds me of how if certain things happen to you, your mind will replay them, and it's a way of, in sort of slightly different ways, and it's all a way of processing our experiences. And I can't help but kind of relate that to this idea of you know, claymation, and then in film, and then in animation, and the way that you use these different mediums to replay these non-narrative visual points. You return to these different processes we've just talked about time and time again across your practice. Why is it that you keep returning to these mediums? Like, what brings you back to them each time?
Very good question. So, first of all, I'm hoping in the viewer, as they're jumping between mediums, that they have, it's like snaps you a little bit out of, like, in general, you know, if you're watching a movie, you are expected to accept the reality that's presented to you. And for me, I'm like trying to be like, okay, reality change, reality changed again, like kind of like constantly snapping people out of their, I guess, like the normality of whatever reality they accepted. Because I think it's very interesting as a collage to put these different POVs, I guess, point of views, together and like link them in a way that's like switches. It's like takes a very active viewer, like you said, to like weave them together. And the reason I also do that as a creative person is because there's certain things you can't do in reality that you can do very well in CGI or claymation. So I sort of kind of curate my scenes based on, oh, well, I'll do this better. This will be better to do in CGI. If I want to have somebody's head flip off and fly into the air, that's a lot easier to do in CGI. So it's like, as a creative individual, taking advantage of what I have available to me in terms of materials and mediums, and why not limit, why limit myself to one thing? I just do a little of everything and smush it all together, which I think is very like, it's almost like our scrolling culture or whatever. I think everyone's a little more used to it. We're like kind of more used to like, if you change the channel on the TV or you're like scrolling through Instagram, there's
that's really interesting. Yeah, the way it sort of digs into the way our minds flicker quite naturally, actually.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the kind of more ancient ideas and visuals in this, because you've already, you've referenced Carl Jung, got a footnote there for him. And there are a lot of, I had my own interpretations. You've had some. I quite like to talk about mythology, if I may. You mentioned Narcissus was a sort of a story that kind of wove into this. I wonder if you could speak a bit more about that and, deepen that sort of interpretation with the audience.
Right, absolutely. So in this case, the female, she splits into two, and she's basically making love to herself, which to me is like based on the Narcissus, I'm sure everyone's familiar with, where you sort of fall in love with your image. And in this case, I kind of think of it like if you've ever had sexual encounters with someone for the first time, there's like a newness to it, and there's like a totally different reality that you enter with that person. And it's almost like their body becomes part of you, and there's like this like really physicality to it. I've been married for a long time, so it's been a while since I've had that, but I think there is like that sort of newness of sexuality where you're like, I'm exploring this body for the first time, and sometimes I feel that way in my own self. If you ever come to, like, I just arrived in New York yesterday, and I'm like, I'm in a new city. It's like, of course I've been here a million times, but like you turn on the like juices of like, I'm alive now and I'm aware here, like we're in my own hometown in LA. I'm like, whatever. You don't really pay attention. I think it's like your vision of reality becomes like blurred by being bored a little bit. Sorry to go on a tangent, but I think there's like the newness of looking at something for the first time, but that newness being yourself, also looking at yourself for the first time, and then like interacting with yourself for the first time as a body. To me, this piece is a lot about like the body-mind connection and the body-mind separation. So just like
very powerful.
Oh, thank you.
Very powerful, yeah. I had another interpretation, which was because there are a lot of snakes, aren't there? So there's a figure in Greek mythology, the Amphibania, which is a two-headed snake monster. And the story goes that it was like a gorgon. It's like a nasty monster, but it was created from the blood that dripped off Medusa's head as it was decapitated. And it was a symbol worn by women hoping to get pregnant in ancient Greece. So it had this darkness, and there's this power of like female sexuality and the virility, but also the potency of female sexuality in like a good sense, and also in a something you couldn't even fathom worth. And I thought it was so great how your work has all these sort of deeper meanings and sort of images that spring to mind. And I think we should watch a bit more of it.
Okay.
Scary stuff.
Yeah, a little out of context. Feel free to watch the whole video if you're into it. Sorry,
Yeah,
you first.
please do. Come to booth C11 or head to the Daata NFT marketplace where it's there.
Yeah.
I have another question. I was just thinking, you've mentioned the word reality a lot. And I've read in a previous interview with you that you started making films really young because you felt that like reality is boring. And you wanted a whole universe to explore, which is your imagination. And what's fascinating about a piece like this is that I really feel we get a slice of that, or a little kind of window into Trulee's world, Trulee's universe, through all the different mediums and processes and, as you say, the complex layers of imagery there. And also the teenage rebellion in there. The rebel Trulee who's like, no, reality sucks. I want to go off in loads of different directions.
Yeah.
As we said at the very beginning, this work is now an NFT. It's minted on chain. This is the first time you've entered this new reality. It's a bit of a tangent question, actually, but there's so many associations there to be connected with the concepts of like the metaverse, for example. It's quite a natural step for such an immersive artist such as yourself. On the other hand, your work is so inherently tactile, it's handmade, and I wondered what your personal opinions are on the metaverse.
Okay.
Jumped a bit
That was
there.
like a lot of things at once. Totally. So, okay. First of all,
Jump
I'm not an
wherever you want.
expert on the metaverse.
I don't think anyone is.
Right. Yeah. And I see pros and cons to it. So, like, I'm not like an idealist about it. But I also think as an artist, there's so many potential, like, cool things. So I think that's true with everything, right? It's like, oh, we have computers. Is that good or bad? Like, kind of both, right? Like, the internet, is it good or bad? Like, in the beginning, you think it's like only good, but then it like kind of can turn bad. So it's not, I'm not going to be moral in my response. I'm going to be like, as an artist, what I think, if that's fair.
Yeah, 100%.
As an artist, I think it's super awesome. The potential, and if you give me like a new thing, I'm going to like make something cool with it. So that's like, the kid in me or whatever, not the like adult me that's like, I don't know if this is good for you, young lady. But for me, I think it's super awesome. And I make immersive environments with my work. So it's like a new level. And I think it's like we're at the beginning stages. So who knows, right? But I'm like super like into embracing the change as long as it's done in a good way, that people have choice. Not like in a control kind of way. I don't know. I think if, obviously what can happen with something cool is that like the government and the powerful people take over and make it bad. So besides that, as an artist to create like a whole new world and then like have a version of that that's like interactive, I think it's super awesome. I'm like way into it. I hope that we get through like the whole like VR headset. Hopefully, I think that's going to be like a short-lived phase where people can, be more immersive in their environment without the clunky headset. gear, but I remember like the first cell phone was like this giant thing, right? And now we're like basically cell phoning through our ears. So I don't know. I have high hopes for it. And I think the community in general that's been kind of like leading the way on this whole new world is hopefully a little bit like cooler and like thinking ahead more to make sure that everyone has like access and it's not just like a way to make more money for rich people, but we'll see.
Very well answered.
Okay. Yeah.
And then finally, and I think, I'd really like to hear some other people's questions. We've just mentioned reality. We are living in a reality right here in the States where women's sexuality is potentially going to be, that power is going to be withdrawn out of their hands. And I don't know, I just wondered if you had any final words for people who have the pleasure to see it here in the flesh, in this place, in this time. The joy of an exhibition is that it kind of always feels fresh and it's always a one-off. And I wondered if you wanted to speak to that at all.
Yeah, that's a great way to talk about this. Yeah, so this piece in general is about female empowerment and self-pleasure and like having enjoyment in your body without it being necessarily about a man, which I think is really important. It's very queer and a kind of like exploration of your like consciousness and soul in a sexual way. And yeah, it's so crazy to me. I don't want to get too political, but like what's happening in the political sphere with the abortion issue. But it's, to me, this is like a very timely exhibition in that way where it is a celebration of like female empowerment and sexuality that's like more a self-pleasure mechanism. It's like we're not relying on a man to make you feel good. Which is super obvious,
really
I think,
powerful.
but it's not something people usually want to talk about because it's a little embarrassing. And as a like Southern Baptist little girl, like it took me till I was like my late 30s where I was like okay with having sexual work. I was like would always be like hiding it a little bit, like behind some symbolism, and it's time to just talk about it for real. I'm very happy to talk about it honestly. So yeah, I think women are super powerful beings, and the fact that they want to have pleasure is not always about having kids. So I think that's super obvious, but I feel like very proud to have this piece in the show right now because it's like it is addressing very current issues, in my opinion. So thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you. Trulee Hall, everybody.
Aw. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah.
Should we do that?
We can do a roving mic situation.
Okay,
Have
yeah.
people done
I
a
hate
roving
sitting.
mic?
I
Would
feel
that
weird
work?
sitting.
Okay, great. So, does anybody? Well, God, pressure's on now. Does anybody have any questions?
Right. Exactly.
Otherwise, we'll just get up here and do a little dance. Yeah.
There's so much I want to say about the video anyway, so don't feel like you have to. But
if not, I do have some more questions. So pressure is
yeah.
off, guys. But if anybody's got a tiny little
I want to
question.
say this because I didn't get to mention it.
Yeah.
So in my brain, I'm just explaining the video a tiny bit, but like it starts with one woman in one line, and then she like splits into two, and then more lines come, and then she splits into like kind of more multi-dimensional version of herself. So the multiple lines are to me like the multiple like dimensions of like reality. I know that's like sounds sort of esoteric or whatever, but like it's almost like when you're turning to a radio station and there's like, oh yeah, I'm on this vibe or on this like this channel, and I wanted to have it like she's spinning, so it's not just like up and down, it's like changing the channel all the time. And then sometimes the lines are really scribbly like this. And then that to me is like more of like a turbulent symbol. So like when I would do like more kind of like more intense sexual things, I would do it more like that. So I want to be like more of an emotional, also an emotional symbol with the lines, if that makes sense.
It's lovely
I
detail.
also thought of it as like maybe like kind of like, and not screensaver, but like some way that you're like, you know, when people like put you in a trance or you're, not that I've done this, but you know, being hypnotized. Like I want it to be like, create
It is
a
very
mood.
hypnotic.
Yeah, exactly.
Very.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you so much for all the, you know, the context and, you know, info about the process. I was wondering, in terms of casting a piece like this, the actors, the, you know, the human beings who are a part of this piece, at what point in the process do you zero in on specific humans who exist in the world? Because so much of it is, you know, impacted in terms of their physical presence. Are you looking for specific types of people, or do you find people and then create the world around those that you find, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's a great question. And super, like, for real, I make a painting and then I try to match the painting. So a lot of times my figures are like green or red, or they're like different colors. And so I paint them red or whatever. But in this case, I was like, oh, this kind of looks like my friend Coco. And she's like a dancer, like a stripper, but also an artist, like conceptual artist. I've known her forever. I was like, it kind of looks like Coco. So I asked her, and I was like, do you know anyone who's like kind of looks like your twin? Like, that's like your friend that's like kind of twinsy with you? And she was like, oh my God, yeah. So in this case, it's like kind of like self-volunteering, the actors. They were like super into it and like, oh yeah, we'll be twins. I don't know. It's like super easygoing like that. I have a lot of friends in LA, and sometimes I'll do a casting call just on my Instagram, and I have like hundreds of people like, I want to be in your video, you know. So that's how I find people, is like they just like self like, me, or whatever. So yeah, if that makes sense. My friend Coco, I've known her a long time. She's been in like 8 of my videos. She's like the main Asian figure that you see. But when I originally drew the characters, I think I was just like with the eyes or whatever, and it's like seemed to fit perfectly with Coco's face, and she was like just the perfect person to fit that. Does that make sense? Yeah, I have now like a broad range of actors that I call from, and I work with the same people a lot, over and over.
Hey, so in reference to what you were just talking about with the lines and the characters, you have these avatar characters floating on these grids of lines and everything. You're referencing Max Headroom, right? Those are like, I thought of Max Headroom when I first saw it.
Referencing who?
Max Headroom? I just
Oh
dated
my God,
myself
I
totally,
love that.
didn't I?
Yes. Oh my God, I didn't even consciously do that, but yeah, that's like a huge influence from the 80s.
Right.
Oh my God.
Talk about
I didn't
metaverse.
Think about that.
Yeah.
It's super
But
cool.
My question
Yeah.
actually is about your approach to animation, and you know, you've used stop motion and 3D animation and this kind of avatar animation, as well as the props and everything that you use in the live sets. So I was wondering if you had any specific relationships or inspirations in the way that you bounce back and forth between these different styles of animation, or is it just purely instinctual for you?
Yeah, so nothing specific, but I do feel like growing up, so I was born in 76, so in the early 80s, I think it was very popular in late 70s, even on like Sesame Street or whatever, to have animations that switched. They're like super trippy at the time. They would switch between like drawing and then real life, and I don't know. I think I just maybe inherited that as like a kid, absorbed in media of the time. But I love collage. In terms of like artists that really influenced me, early on, I would say like I was more interested in painters. I didn't know many video artists like as a teenager, so it was maybe more pop culture, I guess. But yeah, good question. I think it's like as we absorb, and I know that as generations change, we absorb more and more media from different like styles. Like I'm raising my 9-year-old niece, and her whole vibe with her TV style is so different than when I was little. When I was young, I was like making fun of television all the time in my own personal performances, and commercials were so retarded. Like now, sorry to use the word retarded, they were so stupid. But now they're very sophisticated. Like commercials are like confusing and interesting and like multi-dimensional and super like, when we were little, I don't know anyone on my age group, but like they were so stupid that it was like, it turned you off on the product. I don't know if that makes any sense. But now media is very sophisticated, but I think I definitely like inherited my initial media experience just from like stupid TV, like bad TV. Like Mr. Rogers
That's a really
kind of vibe.
good question.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Anybody? I've got a quick question. What was the first work of art you ever made?
I mean, that's a little hard to determine, like, at what age. Like, when I said, I was like, oh, this was really good.
Well, I guess it's when you start feeling like you're an artist.
I think it's like, probably, I would say, when I was like, oh, yeah, this is like good. Like, this is really good. Was in undergrad, maybe 19, when I started to do my first animation. And I was trying to do like some videos for my school, like art school projects. And I decided, you know, I have this, they gave you this camera. It was like kind of a basic camera. But I wanted to do animation, even it wasn't set up for it, but I would just like press on and off on the camera really fast. So I'd be like really fast and then move the objects. But I would do like a mop, like paint on the floor, and then like have a mop. Like the mop was making the paintings and stuff like that. So it was like very crude. And then the sound would be, I had like old records. I had an old record collection just from thrift stores. And I would play these like kind of like crude like records, like scratchy records on top of it. So I think that's when I knew I was a video artist. And the first time I was like, yeah, I made my own thing and it's like so cool. Like, I don't know. Everyone can paint or whatever, but no one's done this thing that I just made up.
Very rock and roll. Does anybody else have any other questions? If not, I think
I know,
we should.
it's hard, yeah.
I think, you know, we've covered a lot of ground here.
Right, that's true.
I
Yeah.
think we should call it a day. End on
Fantastic.
a high.
Olivia, you've been amazing.
Truly, you've been amazing. Give it up for Trulee Hall, everybody.
Oh, thank you. And also Olivia.
Thank you all so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for being here. There's a lot going on, so I appreciate your attention.
And just to remind you, you know, this has all come about because of Trulee's wonderful creativity, and going to give it a bit of a plug, but Daata, the gallery I work for, Daata is the leading commissioning body and gallery that supports time-based media, that's digital artists, filmmakers, and sort of new digital media. And the work is for sale as an NFT, as an edition of 8, each one priced at 1 ETH. If you're new to NFTs or if you're curious, come and say hi. We'd love to chat to you about it. We're at booth C11, and I think we'll be heading over there now. And it'd be good to say hi to some of you. So come along. Don't be shy. Thank you so much for coming.
It's true. Thank you, Olivia. Also, I want to say the first one went to a very prestigious gallery. It was not a
you'll
gallery,
be in
it's a
good
museum.
company.
Yeah. The Villa Schnonigen bought the first one, which is a very fancy museum outside Berlin, Villa Schnonigen. I don't know. Anyway, I was like very happy about that, so I'm gonna brag it for a second. Thank you, sweetie. Appreciate you all coming.